And we are live now.
Right? Meow.
Right? Meow. You're gonna get my dog barking.
Uh-oh.
I know. By the way, it already feels like 6 years ago. Who made it furthest in PTCS?
My alt made what, the finals?
Oh yeah, you made the finals.
In the perfect draft.
Oh, minor detail.
Yeah,
Minor
minor
detail.
detail. Hey, I know some handsome guys that did a perfect draft stream a few weeks ago. Maybe we sometimes know what we're doing. Yeah.
It was it was on my alt that I only enter in the 2 Diamond Pack weeklies, so I'm pretty sure that no one really uh no one really plays those weeklies, so I kind of
I need to get on them now that we have Go. I can actually do stuff with my alt.
yeah. I didn't
I think I might fire up my 4th alt team with Go and, just playing, at least try and qualify in perfect draft and, maybe some other random format to see if get another lottery ticket for next month.
Totally. Yo, Slibber, thanks for always showing up, man, and helping us out with moderating. So let's see. So, out of our mates, sorry, I was just about to ask a question about how in the world the weeklies are filling up so fast right now, and then my brain branched to like 2 or 3 other questions. Yeah, it's been a long day. Monday is my Zoom day now. I'm in like 8 hours straight, sometimes 9 or 10 hours straight of Zooms. So who in the dailies and weeklies? I made it freaking round 2. Good lord. What about Aster? You made it to round 3?
I made it to round 4 in both the daily and the weekly tournament. I made it to round 4 with both my alt and my main in the daily, and then lost all 3 in round 4. So I have lots of Juan Gonzalez stock right now.
What's up, DJ? Oh man. I pray I don't have any long lost children across the country, but who knows?
what did I do? In the daily, I played a super aggressive 20 man roster and lost to JDA in 6, I think. And the weekly, I might have made it to round 3. And then the daily perfect draft, I think I lost in round 1.
Nice.
So I had a really quick day on my main. And then it just I laughed every time I won a series with my alt all the way to the finals.
Yeah, I thought you were out of everything because you stopped talking, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, I'm in this semifinals of the perfect draft. I was so confused.
Yeah, so I made the incredibly boneheaded. I've just been so busy in real life. I need to really get re-engaged with PT, but I was telling the guys after stream last week, I'm like, I'm so excited. Like, my wife was like, yeah, you can have Saturday. I was totally going to, like, micro and have fun. And then I forgot and scheduled, like, back-to-back things in the morning. So I didn't even make it home by the time I got busted out. Oh, man. But I had a great brunch, let me tell you. Yeah. Don't know about PTCS.
You can't undervalue the value of a great brunch.
Yeah. I had the best gluten-free, because I have a lot of allergies. Gluten-free, non-dairy, French toast with bananas Foster and like half a pound of bacon. It was glorious. As I got crushed by a fellow E6er. So we're going to do a breakdown of PTCS. So everyone who's going to join us, I'm sure they're here by now. We're going to do a breakdown of PTCS, and so we did. I mean, gosh, that was probably the busiest week ever in our chat. We were all excited about it, and we felt like we had great card advantage with options. Just inherently in the format, it was. I actually, if anyone from Team PT is watching, I loved and I'm someone that has almost every card in the game. I love the fact that it had a diamond cap. That was awesome. And so in the future, the low diamond caps, I think are powerful in the sense that it's a little tip of the hat to people that do have, solid collections most often. It's a nice little tip of the hat. But it still, leaves enough parity built within the format for some collections that may not be as extensive to still do some damage, especially when you start adding cap elements and things like that. It's kind of broad observations before we get into theories and some modeling. I will say the cap was way too generous. There were zero difficult choices to make. I'm not sure, and actually, Exto, we actually touch on that with some of the aggregate stats you did, don't we?
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
When I created the composite batting ratings, it's a bit surprising the spread between the weekly and the daily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think initially my reaction was the same, was the cap was too high. But in my build, and especially building from my main team and my alt, which has very different collection levels, I actually thought there was a lot of cool stuff that you could do, and the choices basically just got shifted. Everybody could afford their 8 best hitters to go in their starting lineup, and then their 3 best starting pitchers for their 3-man rotation. But then you still had a lot of points left, and there are a lot of interesting things that you could do with it. And I feel like that was a good way that you could differentiate your roster, because especially the 8 hitters were going to obviously need days off, and it was tricky. There weren't a ton of guys that played a bunch of positions, so finding guys that could cover, and not just like, oh, I'm going to have this 45 overall guy who plays 5 positions and that'll help me. It was being able to have like silver and gold guys that really weren't a big step down from your starters, but could maybe play 2 or 3 positions. And especially if you were microing, you could probably manage the the off days to um, allow you to kind of play with it a little bit. And then also, some people just use those extra points to really have a strong bullpen, which I think really didn't have a lot of value in 1921. But that was a mistake you had the option to make. Or you could have like a one extra, like elite, 1 or 2 extra elite bats, and just kind of maybe set up a platoon. It gave you some options that we don't really get in any other tournaments, because there's just very rarely a tournament with that loose of a cap. I guess Spores would be the one example where you do have a pretty loose cap and you can do some things, but you also don't have it's not an insane era like 1921 where you have such a big difference in how many starting pitchers you need and what kind of bullpen you need. So I kind of like that when I was actually building for it, and I wasn't expecting it when I did my initial analysis. I was like, oh, this really needed to be like a 1700 cap or something like that.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying, that it added some nuance in other ways. The I don't know. I think this year more than ever, I'm I think I've become more of a fan of the ultra tight caps. Um, for me, one of my favorite building sessions I might have had all year was low cap, like when the dailies first launched, and I think I missed some of the dailies in the beginning because we all had to sign up for weekly so early, kind of like we have to do now. But then when the scoreboard came out and you had to get in there and really start thinking about what dailies you're going to enter and how you're going to stagger, man, building for low cap was so much fun. Um, so I just used to enjoy playing, and I didn't really like hot cap. You can almost just import your league roster and then just change up some of your bench, but yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see what the fact that we're doing this every month now is kind of awesome, and I definitely didn't envision this as PT23 launched, but this has been a pleasant surprise, kind of this shift to a monthly format. Um, so Exto, this is kind of your show tonight, man. Um, So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and Aster, if y'all want to tag team this breakdown of the eras.
Thanks. So yeah, so we're just going to be talking about the daily cap, which was the 1921 era, and then the weekly, which was the 1942 era. The perfect draft, the one that I got second place in on my alt, we're not going to talk about. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
The This is just going back to the things that we were talking about. So both I think 1921 and 1942 were both rebirths. So really it was just, yeah, like Aster said, you had three starting pitchers. You needed some relievers. I think in the cap I went with four. Since I got booted in the first round, I don't think I need to use any of them. Um, I know that there's probably some contention about like pitch counts in these eras. I think I set them to like 120, and that was just from looking at data, um, which I was using to model for this, which was both the Golden Dead Ball Rebirth and then Unsung Heroes. And surprisingly, like I'm not sure if it's just because people when they build the rosters, they just do like a flat like 105 pitch count or not, but or like a 99 or whatever. But if you look at like the observed stats in a lot of the era tournaments, some of the pitchers have not as ridiculously high pitch counts as just what you would kind of expect in like a single game. So like I've seen not in the 1921 and 1946 eras like 150 plus from a lot of guys that even have only about like 90 stamina. When you look at the observed, it seemed to be if you're looking at starters or people who had started more than one game, like they're in the 120 to 125 range. So it's kind of for me that kind of tripped me up.
Yeah. So you know what's funny is that do you guys remember it was a few weeks ago I had Deacon, and he was pitching in a tournament, and I want to say it was like 1917. Good lord, I'm going to get some of this wrong. Do you remember when I posted a screenshot? It was like a 16 inning game, and he threw like 245 pitches.
Was
Oh, I
that
thought.
in the first Dead Ball Jamboree
Was it? Okay, I think it
last
was Dead
Monday?
Ball Jamboree.
Yeah, because that's 1919 settings, which is basically as far back as we go right now. We had that 1871 tournament as a daily briefly, but right now 1919 is the farthest back we go, and that would be the one that would be most likely to get a crazy amount of
Yeah.
stamina out of a pitcher.
Yeah, so that I need to dig that screenshot up because it's hilarious. Um, so I need to. That was in my mind because we actually had a good conversation about this. I think it was Friday night. I think so. We had a good conversation about pitch counts, and yeah, I think I set 120 or 125, and in the weekly, the open, and man, I was kind of regretting that. I do wish I'd been a little more aggressive, but I know we haven't really kind of captured it quantitatively, but there's kind of that rumor of the third time through the order penalty baked into the engine this year that's kind of floating around the communities. But yeah, I do kind of wish. I When we talk about regrets, and I know we're a little early on this, I do wish I'd raised the pitch count a little bit. However, I also wish, and maybe we should do this on another stream. We should run some experiments. I also wish I'd played with some pseudo openers a little bit in the weekly, but that's a whole other conversation. So, rockin'. Let me move this back up real quick. And wait, just kidding, guys. Sorry, technology's hard. All right.
Yeah. So just like we did for the first PTCS, I went in and sort of looked at, the three true outcomes from the base game, and you can kind of see that, strikeouts happen less, home runs happen less, and walks are roughly the same. So, looking at kind of the league totals and whatnot. So from there, we can draw a few conclusions. Um, well, if you go to the next slide, we can see how it actually kind of ended up being. So, looking at like previous tournaments and how like I prepared for it, you can kind of see that, as we go back in time using the unsung heroes and the golden dead ball rebirth, the Ks are down, walks were up in the unsung heroes, and that again it may be just due to the player pool, and home runs were way down. The run environment from 2010 was way down. Uh, well, more in GDB than in unsung heroes, and yeah, you basically had like a suppression of offense for the most part.
Yeah. And interesting, it feels, this is where data is so important, everyone. It feels like there are way more errors, fielding errors. And when we start getting back into dead ball and to some extent rebirth, but especially dead ball, it really feels like there's a lot more. I said that right, I think, but it feels like there's a lot more errors. But the data actually here says not necessarily. So
Yeah, I think it's still kind of relative in that um, there's a little bit of increase, I would guess, but
yeah,
I guess the feeling is I think part of it is that there's more balls in play. I think is the gist of it. So there's more opportunities for errors.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, learnings from PTCS1. So the first when we were kind of scratching our heads when we did this stream like a month ago, it was like how come things didn't kind of line up with what we thought, and so I think we kind of uh, figured out that the card pool matters, and looking at unsung heroes and Golden Dead Battle Birth, it didn't really. Well, personally, I think I made the same mistake. Uh, I never got to the point where I could go and look at the pool of cards and kind of equate what the ratings would be, compare that to what I was kind of looking at to base off my decisions. So, um, and trying to model based off of Unsung Heroes and Golden Dead Ball Rebirth made for some quirky results, I would say. And then, yeah, anything that uh, your model is basically good for interpolation, but not good for extrapolation. So any sort of outliers that you're generating, or any sort of outliers in the card pool, you're gonna have to deal with in some way.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks, kidneys. It is super easy.
All right,
Uh,
critical assumptions.
yeah, so my personal assumptions was that with the K% being so low, the stuff doesn't matter. Um, Everyone will run Babe, and so you're gonna have to deal and try to neutralize that outlier. So I was thinking that movement would be important, and you wanted your pitchers in the game. So this one is probably the weakest assumption, was that con, but this was something that I wanted to kind of use as a differentiator just in my own strategy, was to say, hey, I wanted people with more control, and the coefficients to the model that created seem to value control as well. So that's kind of my justification. I don't know what you guys kind of thought.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. But one thing I thought was interesting is I happened to look. my assumption was there wouldn't be that many babes in the field, just because I thought of it as, a hard card to acquire. The price like never really got below 80,000-90,000, and that was before people knew that this was a format. So I wasn't expecting there to be that many babes, except for among the better teams or teams with really good collections. As it turned out, I happened to look before we got started. There were 75 babes in the field, but it seems like just about everybody that had one was using them, and that's that probably was a big factor, in the home runs. I was kind of almost thinking that movement might not matter that much, because there really weren't that many guys that I thought there would be a lot of in the field that had that kind of power. Bay being one of the few, and I thought a lot of people were going to have some good players, but maybe not so many good power players, and that kind of led. I don't know. I went back and forth, and I really struggled. Hitting, I think, made sense, and I like the the hitting that I picked, and I felt like what we modeled and what my assumptions were pretty much matched. For pitching was just really hard to kind of, even forget modeling, even to conceptualize that Ks were going to be down that much, but. And this is putting on my tinfoil hat for a minute, but it's weird when you think that Ks were down so much, homers were down so much, and walks were basically the same, that you would think, well, stuff and movement don't matter. You really just want the best control guys. But it sure seems like there's other things that stuff and movement impact. And obviously, given the fact that there's so many more balls in play, it must be that stuff and movement have a bigger impact on balls in play. And so if you went with just the best control guys, you might be BABIP to death. And that was something that I didn't really, either I didn't think through, or I thought through poorly, or actually probably more likely is I just didn't have we don't have a lot of great data from this era to either conceptualize or model off of. And so you're going to make mistakes, and that's just something you have to hopefully the key is to do a post-mortem like we're doing here. Look at what happened, look at what you had to work with to begin with, and hopefully if we get another era-based tournament the next time, make less mistakes, because you're never not going to make mistakes. You just have to learn from the one you do and adjust.
Yeah. Are you saying that Bill Holland was a slow pitch softball pitcher this past weekend?
I think,
and yet he actually graded out really well.
Yeah.
It was the Barney Brown.
Barney Brown. Yeah. So there was like there was a cutoff, and I think there's been conversation among people I know that do modeling about break points at 50 and 100, and I definitely think dropping below 50 for the stuff is where you ran into problems. And so I don't know, who knows. Obviously, a lot will be different the next time. But if there's an era, what era they're going to use. But it's just important to kind of, look at the results and look at, what you either, conceptualized or modeled, and say, okay, this is where I made mistakes. And Barney Brown, I definitely feel like was, a pretty big mistake from, where I was thinking, the results were going to go versus where they actually went.
Yeah.
I think also from the previous PTCS, we were kind of shocked at how many home runs were being hit. So I think I kind of saw that movement was generally good, and I was like, well, yeah, if it's good, quantity over quality, let's just lean into movement. So I think that was probably another thing on my part where I was just kind of like, it's got to be there's got to be some quirks that I don't quite understand and still don't understand, but home run suppression sounded like a good idea at the time.
I do. I think a critical takeaway, as we pray in a few weeks we prep for the next PT. Is it CS or MS? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Another
we as we
PTCS.
prep for the next PTCS is that I do think, and we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but just kind of pin it for everyone to consider, is I do think that thresholds are still incredibly relevant. Breakpoints, if you want to call them that, they're still incredibly relevant, and that they shift per the modifiers, right? And so Barney Brown probably a little dangerous. That critical breakpoint for stuff as it relates potentially to Babbitt was probably around like 50-52. And so that critical breakpoint for move, and this is all kind of theoretical, right? But that critical breakpoint for movement was probably around 83-85. And so thinking about those kind of critical breakpoints as you're trying to consider what profiles would be really effective, was still probably a worthwhile exercise, and so it's definitely something I wasn't considering this past week.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's an important distinction that I got lost in, is I was like, I got to have the guy with the highest control, and what I should have been thinking about is what's the threshold that I have to be above a certain level, because that probably would have led me to a better choices. Is, hey, I can get I need to be above, let's say 80, 83 or 85 or whatever the number is. I need to be above 85 for control. Now, who are the best pitchers in looking at all three ratings and various other ratings and the pitch mix that are going to likely have the best results? And I think I got locked in too much on, I want to have the three starters, with the three highest controls. And the other thing is, as Bob I've pointed out, if you're going to use those kind of guys who are high control but don't have the stuff, and don't you're probably going to have a lot more balls in play, and you have to focus more on your defense. And I feel like this format, there were a lot of good hitters at various positions, and there were a lot of good fielders at various positions. There weren't a lot of guys that were both. Yeah. Especially you're talking about mostly diamond and gold players. There's usually some trade-off you're making, and I probably went with guys who needed good defense, but then I also I didn't punt any positions, and I tried to have good defense at the most important positions, but I definitely did not put together an elite defense to back up guys who probably needed it. So in terms of roster construction, it's sometimes important that you can't think of variables like this in a vacuum. You have to think about it holistically. You have to think about how each individual decision is going to impact the entirety of the roster. And so, that can be very important. And I think I lost sight of that a little bit in my roster building.
So this was, by the way, this is not observed stats. This is modeling for hitting. And this is a beast of a sheet. So I actually had to get rid of the title. But Exto, this is your hitting modeling.
Yeah, and thanks to Durden mentioned this to me probably about a month ago. He's like, I have all this data, I want to model it. You know what? This would be a great idea. And it was modeling WOBA based off the ratings. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. And he's like, no. Like, it'll work. And I did it. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, this does work. So having looked at that, like, it's pretty powerful. And like, I don't remember what the R squared was, but in general, like, just like it passes the smell test. And when you're going into things, if you're trying to compete in everything, you need shortcuts, basically, like mental shortcuts to be able to quickly evaluate things. And this is what I kind of use. So, going from the top, you see Harnett, you see Steve O'Neill, Bubbles for catchers, and I think a lot of people probably wait, was this the 1921 or is this the? Oh no, this is 1927. So,
Hold on, just to clarify, Exo, this is the modeling of the for the daily cap that it was 1921 settings, and you use the data from a 1927 tournament to generate this list. Is that correct?
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So this was using 1927 run environment hitters.
Right.
And this is what I use to determine who to play. So, like, I don't know. I don't know if how well you can sort of see it, but Fox doing well, that's probably expected.
Yeah.
Charlie Smith, I don't know if anyone actually ran him. I'd have to go into the tournament to see. I think Denny Lyons, like some of these are kind of obvious. Like I think a lot of people knew Lyons was going to be good. People were going to knew McGraw was going to be good.
Unless you're running Barney Brown.
Unless you're running Barney Brown.
Yeah, Denny Lyons did not help Barney Brown. And that's a good point. It's like this is just the hitting. You look at Charlie Smith. I initially when I saw that on your model the first time, I was like, oh wow, this is a card I really hadn't thought about. This guy's a monster. And then I looked at his defense and I was like, I can't do it. To spend money to get to add a card with that level of defense, I just thought that
especially up the middle.
For at second short or center field, I just wasn't going to punt that low of defense. I mean, I didn't even like the defense, defensive numbers of Miller Huggins and Fred Pfeffer, who I did run. But I just, I felt like to go below that, I was completely, selling out offense for defense. And I feel like those guys were at least, better options for defense than, with still pretty solid bat. But yeah, some of these positions, Fred Snodgrass at center field would be another example of, that bat, grades out really well, but the defense, at center field is probably way too low. I mean, Thomas and DiMaggio, I think a lot of people used and had, and they have like 77 defense. So to go down, I think Snodgrass is in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
That felt like too low for me.
I think in general, as you like, especially for what? Wait, was 1921 the day cap? Or I had this note so many times.
21 was day cap.
And like, I think that the neat thing was that you do get the model kind of pulls out these cards that you never would have really considered, like running Bubbles at catcher, running Grantham, or running what's another one that is kind of interesting? Tom Daly.
Yeah. Morrill at 82 would have been. And so this is where I do wish we had a tight cap. like a 1600. It would have been so much fun being forced to, pick a couple of hitters that you got to drop into the 60s or 70s for. It would have been so much fun.
Yeah, I thought I was smart, and I played Force and Bresnahan, and I didn't get anywhere with them. But I was like, I felt like they were kind of decent backups, like Bresnahan for backup catcher and backup first base, and then Force for basically like second and short.
I did the same. I think we were pretty similar on that. I think we both had Bresnahan and Force.
Yeah, and I had Force to backing up. I think shortstop and I think maybe just shortstop. But then I had John Morrill backing up first, second, and third. I guess with Force also sort of backing up third. But
you know what? Then, Esther, I had Oyster Burns. I don't know if you remember, but I had him as a super utility. Like Oyster Burns at a 94.
Right. And that's kind of it's a neat thing that a really loose cap allows you to do. But you're right. It would have been more fun to make the better choices, like a situation where we look at first base, where Fox and Morrill basically grade out the same, but you save 11 points going with Morrill. Those are the kind of trade-offs that really knowing the player pool can benefit you. Whereas I think a lot of people would just look at Fox, and they've played Fox in league for a long time, that he was still viable, and he was usable in so many different tournament formats for a long time, that it would have been easy to just say, oh, Fox is one of the best bats in the format. Let me go ahead and use him. Whereas, now granted, Moral's a little bit, or actually a good bit rarer than Fox, but still, for the people who have both, in a tighter cap, that would have made sense. Whereas, the answer in a loose cap like this was, hey, figure out a way to use both. Or I actually ended up with Buck Leonard as my first baseman, and then Moral, as the backup, at multiple positions. So anytime Buck Leonard couldn't play, I had Moral in there, and and that at least had me with a pretty strong bat in the games where my starters were tired. But it's definitely a trade-off in terms of which was more fun to build for. I just like this because it was the first time I feel like we really, other than maybe Spores, had such a loose cap like this.
Yeah.
But in general, I think tighter ones make for more interesting choices.
Yeah, I would even, by the way, I'd be totally cool if they did, a slightly loose cap for one format and then a super tight cap for the other one. Like run a super tight cap for the daily and a looser cap. Like, I'd rather do that than even have the opens,
Right.
So, if Team PT happens to be listening, that's my vote. All right, here we go. Models for pitching. Look at that. Who's that? That's
so, someone, I was concerned about these results, so I phoned a friend to go through some stuff, and there were a few bugs in the model, but it is what it is. But yeah, Barney Brown apparently using 1927 data should be a rock star. I think the other names on this list are decent, like Panic, probably a good choice.
Yeah.
Holland, probably a good choice.
Who's this?
If you could win a Burley Grimes and then go back in time and play him in the tournament, probably a good choice.
Would have been a beast.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pinnock was great. Pinnock was a beast.
And then there aren't many classified relievers in the card pool, so it's like you had Malzenberger, and then I don't know if anyone ever actually. If you have to go to your bullpen, I'm pretty sure that you're gonna have a bad time.
You're losing. Yeah, agreed. Unless it's in the open and you're trying to do some funky stuff with and trying to create some pseudo situations. Which, if I'd had the time, I totally would have loved trying. All right, here we go.
Well, actually, real quick, I just to Seawitt's question, what I did was I started with, these are the pool of I think I came up with 7 or 8 pitchers that I thought were viable for this format, and then once I kind of had used some of the modeling and my conceptualizing of what I thought was going to be a good pitcher, I then took those, I think I had 8 or 9, and I said, okay, do any of these have a difference maker bat? And basically, the only guy that really I think did was Al Spalding, but I didn't really love his pitching profile.
Dude, those splits are horrifying.
And I was just like, you know what, the bat's not worth it. He seemed like the lowest on the list of the pitchers, and I was just like, I don't think the bat's good enough to justify, that kind of using that kind of pitching profile. So it's something where, I saw it as a differentiator. Like if there'd been a bat Bullet Joe Rogan level bat, then obviously that might have been a much bigger factor, and I would have tried to, figure out just how valuable it was. But looking at most of the guys that I was considering, there really weren't any even remotely relevant bats. So I just didn't. I kind of set it aside as a relevant factor.
I ripped Spalding, or was it early Friday morning? I think I can't remember. I ripped Spalding, and even with that bat, and even with that V-right profile pitching, I flipped him in about 5 minutes. I just, man, he scared me with in an environment where Babe was king, and Buck Leonard, and a few of those left-handed monsters. I just, man, to whoever played him, I'd love to hear how he did, but he terrified me in this tournament.
It's almost like there's going to be a slide in like 5 minutes that's going to show how he did.
I haven't seen it. I can't wait to see
okay.
it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Here you go, Exto.
So in general, when you look at the run environment, it's fairly close.
It is.
Ish. Like it wasn't like you're not off by like more than one. So as you go across, everything is kind of within 0.3 of what I was using for. No, that's not a checkerboard. But you can see like Ks were basically a little bit down from GDB, walks are a little bit down, home runs were a little bit up. The ERA was about on par. Runs against was about on par. The FIP was about on par. BABIP was about on par. What was about on par, and you just had a little double the errors.
This is called Denny Lions. Right here.
And just double, right? Of course.
So
yeah, that's called Denny Lions.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, looky here.
Wow, that is hard to read. Okay. Good thing I have the slides. So I guess going from left to right, basically Santop with 545 plate appearances had the best WOBA and WRC plus, followed by Gabby Harnett, and then Severid was just below average, slightly below average at 90. Salkid had 360 plate appearances and had 84 WRC plus, and Johnny Kling apparently got some play.
Yeah.
With an 81 WRC plus.
This Sisler is interesting. I came really close to rostering him, and I mean, I'm glad I didn't now. But Buck and Fox ruled the roost, and Moral, your model is kind of doing well. It's holding up so far.
Yeah.
So, Exo, just to clarify here, this is the top 5 plate appearances at each position rated in descending order of WOBA, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure people understand what they're seeing. If there's a player that's not showing up on the list, I want to make sure they understand why.
This is pretty scary. How much you nailed it, man.
Yeah, the batting was pretty bang on, and with more plate appearances, I'm sure like things with more plate appearances to model off of and more plate appearances to look at, like things kind of shook out as you kind of expected. So Morrill and Pfeffer and Hub Collins were all above average bats at second. Third base, McGraw and Dandridge was above average. Werber, Sewell, and Cam were below. Sewell was the top hitting shortstop with behind Cronin and Glenn Wright. Rabbit had a 47 WRC plus, but a 1.35 WAR, indicating that defense matters. Babe Ruth, best hitter in left field, 150 WRC plus. I think that's. Oh no, yeah, Babe Ruth was the best hitter in the format. So
yeah, which you predicted.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had Jimmy Fox up second, and okay. Aster makes fun of me because every time I say his name, I say it differently. Delahunty.
Call him Mr. Ed.
Mr. Ed. I mean, you nailed it, buddy. You nailed the hitting.
Thanks. It didn't help me in the tournament, but
you won the modeling contest.
Well, like I've always been under the impression, incorrectly, that defense doesn't matter, but as we see when you go back that far in time, defense kind of does matter. So maybe I should have been looking more at WAR or something, as like Mel Ott had a higher WAR than Babe Ruth. I don't know. Is Mel Ott a better right fielder?
He's
like over his defensive rating is over 100 in right field.
Yeah.
So, whereas Babe Ruth in right field, I think, is like a 68 or 69. So, definitely, significant upgrade defensively. I wasn't expecting Spat to play up as well as it did.
Yeah. Well, 400 at bats.
Of course, and
Yeah.
part of that is it's interesting to see that a lot of people with probably looking at the choice of, do I want to play Babe in left and Ott right, or do I want to play Babe in right and Mr. Ed in left, went with Mr. Ed because he had over 4 times as many plate appearances. Both were cards that probably were not cheap, but like were fairly readily available. And so it's interesting that so many more people went with Delahanty, but that's it's one of those things. It's limited data, but it's all the data we're going to have for this format because I doubt we see it again. So you just try and take from it whatever you can.
That would
and
be
so
a swerve, wouldn't it? To repeat the
just run it back.
Do what?
Just run it back.
Yeah, just run it back.
3 is the same thing.
Hey guys, we're just do it again.
Yeah. All of you that sold off all the cards that didn't perform for you, you're gonna have to buy all those.
Denny Lines goes back up to 115K. That'd be awesome.
So, Ludlud, I think part of the problem was I think we underestimated, based on the tournaments that we were looking at from similar time frames, just how many errors there would be. And so I knew that there would be more errors, but I wasn't prepared for that it was nearly double the tournament that we were looking at as like one of the closer time frames that we had any real data from. There was the new gold floor diamond ceiling that was the same year, but there were only a couple of them that were played, and I didn't feel like that was enough data to really make any kind of real decisions off of. And I also just happened to not get into it more than I think once. And so I think, looking from the 1927 data, I just wasn't expecting. So I prioritized defense, but clearly not enough. Yeah. One part of also just looking at it as the tournament was playing out, I was getting weird, like Buck Leonard had like 3 error games, which you just don't, certainly first base defense, you don't ever really think about, and you don't ever really see, first baseman, and Buck Leonard's not like a bad defensive first baseman, being that bad. Yeah.
All right, pitchers. Oh, did Exto go to dinner?
No, I'm still here. So pitchers. Pitchers were a little interesting. Pipgrass, which I think I won like 2 months ago and sold for like 20K, which I now regret. He was pretty good. Holland was pretty good.
Newhouser was a surprise for sure.
Yeah. Newhouser, I saw, and I had thought about picking him up just because I wanted a lefty bat to try to go against Leonard and Ruth. And assuming that like not a lot of people are going to be playing Delahanty, not a lot of people. Well, Fox probably had a lot too, but
yeah.
Furpo, he was also kind of surprising. As you go down, you see my friend Barney Brown, which, if you look at his FIP, was not that bad.
Oh man. So the Bill Sherdell dominating over there. Let's just not look at the sample size. Guys, you missed out by not playing Bill Sherdell. All right. Now we got the weekly.
Yeah, so did the same sort of analysis between the daily and the weekly.
More differences here, though.
There's probably a little bit more difference, which was a little bit more surprising, considering that they were both around the same range, I guess. So yeah. Ks are up, Walks were way down. Home runs were way down. ERA was way down. Runs against were way down. It was about the same. BABIP 10 points. Woba 15 points, and errors were roughly about the same. So
Yeah. And here we got the hitters.
yeah, so here are the hitters. I guess going left to right. Tom Daly should have played him, even though I don't know what his defense was. At least him listed as a catcher, he seemed to do well, but that
Yeah,
could just
he's
be how I was pulling
not
data.
great. I think he's around 60 stock, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So again, probably Severid was the most played and had a decent WAR, but it looks like Santop was probably you'd get a little bit more defense out of him for a lot worse bat. Morrill, ton of people played him at first. He did really well. Leonard Weasley was someone that I guess we saw more. Strangely, I guess Weasley's a 90. Is Weasley also a 98?
No, he's
No, he's a
94.
91. 94 91, sorry.
Some
Okay.
low diamond, definitely. I
Yeah,
can't remember.
low D.
So, like I guess in weeklies you kind of expect to see a lot more of the diamond players. So you see more Hub Collins, who's leading for second. John McGraw again, and Dandridge and Willie Com at third. Mixture of Cronin, Sewell, Marinville, Wright, Fletcher. Surprisingly, Fletcher for someone who I would have thought would have had good D, like the WAR for him at shortstop seemed to be rather low.
Yeah.
So
Horrible.
probably a miss there. Left field, Babe Ruth. Some people played Gavi, I guess, which seemed to be doing about average.
Yeah, Ed was way down. Yeesh.
Snodgrass in center gave you above average bat, but Roy Thomas gave you an average bat, and not as good defense as what you kind of expected. Ruth and Wright crushed it. Yeah, so is a little. I guess the weekly seemed a little more confusing to me. Just like based on the results, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, and just how significantly the hitting was repressed is, yeah, it's like 20, 30 points difference across all hitters.
Yeah.
And pitchers. Bill Holland killed it.
Yeah, Bill Holland with basically I was doing batter's face, and you kind of divide that by three, and you get kind of the amount of innings that they pitch. So
Yeah.
he had about 1,000 innings, and yeah, had a 20-point lead in WOBA against. So that's the best FIP for the tournament. Dizzy Dean, haven't really seen much of him, but I think I played Young, Holland, and where's my? He's not even on here.
Yeah,
Barney
I'm trying to
Brown.
remember. I think I had Holland, Pinnock, and
Oh yeah, I think I had Holland, Pennick, and Young is what I ran.
yeah, I did too. Holland, Pinnock, and Young. It didn't help me outplay three of the best four apparently because I got knocked out. But
Yeah. Again, I guess going back to the previous slide, the Ks per nine were still down, so I guess you'd still get not as many balls in play as the original, but you still had a bit more balls in play than
yeah,
what you
Charles
kind of
Bender.
expected.
Yeah, look at that 233 Woba. Charles Bender became Ricky Vaughn with the glasses. With the glasses. It's critical distinction.
Yeah, so he's in Malzenberg. So going back and looking at kind of what the player pool was and trying to evaluate it. So it looked like the weekly ran a little longer, but looking at I guess the composite ratings, so based on plate appearances, what their ratings were and what their contribution to the player pool was, I kind of didn't go far enough, I think, for the weekly. I only encompassed probably about 55% of the total plate appearances, but for the daily, it was about two-thirds. So even when you take that into consideration, like the top, whatever, 66 percentile or top 55 percentile. It's not a huge part of it, but like the card pool looked really close.
Yeah.
Just
The cap was too loose.
yeah, I think if the cap was lower in the day cap, um, I would have imagined that these numbers would have been a lot lower.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you'd gone all the way down to capturing 100% of the plate appearances, the daily would have gotten down because a lot of people, 15-20% of the time that they were playing their bench, they were that's where you had the guys who were using High Myers and Jimmy Walsh as their backups. That's where those guys with much lesser skills come in. But still, it's interesting that people were still able to get a lot of at bats in the daily from pretty much the same guys that they were playing in the weekly. So I do think that's interesting. And certainly, the main, I think, conclusion from that is that the cap was too loose. But it's just interesting in terms of roster building that you really can get most of your at bats in a cap from your top guys, and that is an important consideration.
But even then, if you think about it, like the amount of like every whatever 7 games, half the teams get eliminated. So the opportunity for those lesser backup players to play is going to be diminished. So even like I'd imagine, I'd have to go in. It'd be interesting to go into the tournament to see, but like I wonder on winning team, um, like how many plate appearances did like a Walsh have, or uh, like some of the lesser backups.
Right. Well, and I think it's not so much that they get eliminated; it's that the teams that advance farther probably didn't play as many games. Got some sweeps or some 5-game series where they didn't even really have to play any of their backups, and so or maybe like just in game 5, a couple of their backups played, and so in that case, the teams that advance probably are gonna not use as many of their backup guys unless they just happen to also have some long series, which certainly is more likely to happen in this format than in a non-era based format, just because especially the pitchers, you're never going to have a fatigue bullpen, and hitters definitely if you didn't budget out your bench spots well, you could end up with some fatigue problems in like a couple 7-game series in a row, but still wouldn't be nearly as bad as in a non-era based format where you might have that same problem with both your pitching and
Yeah. I think I had one backup position that I didn't feel good about. I'm pretty sure I had the new Bresnahan at catcher and first. I had Davey Force at second and short, I think. Oyster at third, left, and right, and then Chickstall, the Iron Chickstall in center, I think was my backups. And so my only real concern I had going in was just Chickstall. And so I felt like the cap was loose enough to have some really good backups kind of spread out.
Yep.
All right, we have 3 graphs to wrap it up.
Yeah. So Aster said, every good presentation has some graphs in it. So I spun these up earlier today. So this is a comparison to show, I guess, how the composite stuff rating. So looking at the distribution of the handedness of the batters faced, how did that relate to the observed K per 9? And you can kind of see that, as 1942, as you got more stuff, you struck out more batters than if you were the same batter or the same pitcher in 1921.
Yeah.
So
Is this
I think
Leon
that
Day? I think it is, right? About 92? Or is that... yeah, I don't know. It's okay. I'm being distracting.
I can go and look that up, but
it's all right. 1921 stuff.
yeah, and the trend lines aren't meant to be predictive or anything, but just kind of show what the average the average kind of was for between the two, and you can kind of see that what is it it's almost it's a little it's the slope is what 0.0564 versus 0.0234, so remember your math at whatever uh it's about 80% more, I guess.
Yeah.
um
So K wasn't inconsequential, just not the 20% that we see in 2010.
you can kind of see, you could probably see Barney Brown on the left there at
Addy Joss doesn't even make the list. He's over here somewhere.
yeah. So this was a little bit more interesting in that the movement and the home run per nine for the environment. Again, these are just kind of linear estimations, but the even those like trend lines are a little suspect. So I would say it was really hard to kind of evaluate what the impact of movement, other than in 1942, it seemed to be uh, less home runs almost. Now that I look at it.
Yeah, and 1942 is not near as predictive. Like, blue has a little bit of a trend to it. Like, a little bit of a trend. Orange is just like, forgot how to do math. Like, this is all over the place. Which is interesting, right? So.
Yeah, it's just like a Jackson Pollock scatter plot type of thing.
Yeah. All right, control.
And I just want to jump in 1 second, just point out, like, if you look at the far, top left is, the guys with really low movement. Doesn't look like people really even used them in 1942, but a few of them got used in the 1921 sample, and that was just like utter disaster for those guys. Those were like the few guys who really got pummeled. I guess there was somebody in probably small sample size in 1921 that had movement in the 90s that led up almost a home run per nine. But it does lend to the theory that there's a break point somewhere, for home runs, that just if your movement is that low, can just really be bad. So that kind of, as we're thinking about building for future tournaments, is just maybe we need to. It might be difficult to figure out where those cutoffs are, but just to kind of say, okay, when we're deciding which are going to be our pitchers, let's say nobody with a movement below 60 is going to be somebody we even consider, or maybe that number is higher or lower. I don't know, but it's just interesting to see there's spots where it really kind of falls apart, and the extremes can be really dangerous. Because I initially, similar era was the gold historical cap was 1927 settings for a while, until it recently got changed to 1971. And for a while, I was trying to run high, low, high guys, and it was like okay, but like some of the like guy like Preacher Row that has 50 or 60 movement, so every once in a while would just get completely annihilated. And so I switched to a different set of pitchers for that, and did much better. And just kind of gave up on that hypothesis, and really looked to find a better guys better suited for the format. That the high low high just didn't work, and I didn't even try it in this tournament based on that experience. But this certainly looking at it bears it out that if you went really low with the movement, you were probably going to get pummeled.
Yeah.
But the two on the left are Ray Prim and Preacher Bro.
Oh my gosh! I promise you, those were the two I was going to guess. Exto, you stole my thunder. Ah! I was so going to guess them.
You want to guess who's the 66?
Okay, hold on.
Is 66? Is he
oh my god,
no.
he's like 50s. That was so dumb. I was trying to go through all the roster in my head real quick. All right, 66. I give up.
It is Dizzy Dean.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
By the way,
He's
thanks
like,
for the raid, Commish. I appreciate that, man.
yeah, he's like 75, 61, 90 something. 60, 75, 66, 91. Yeah. That was an interesting profile that I wasn't quite sure if it was going to work
Yeah.
for this format.
Well, it did not. The actually Dizzy Dean bared out pretty well in WOBA data, but I remember seeing him earlier. All right, control. Look how pretty this is. Wow.
I guess everything kind of operated within the breakpoints for control. So yeah, basically no one without lower than 50. Well, I guess one person with lower than 50 control got played in 1921, but um,
Is that Christy Mathewson?
I'm looking it up.
Trying to
Who
think
is
his
this?
control. Is he 52 or 49? I just saw his cap, so I figured someone may.
Oh no, it's a new card. I think it just came out last week.
Mm, gotcha.
So it's limited edition Rube Waddle.
Oh
Mm.
yeah, yeah. What's up, Fab? Nah, we're wrapping up the math right now. We saved the prettiest chart just for you, Fabtron. The
So
so control was incredibly predictive of walks, which were not as elevated as we thought they were going to be, but
yeah, the other end of the outliers on the right hand side is our friend Barney Brown with 98.8 or 98.9, basically 99 control.
I love it.
So
Hashtag give Barney a chance.
Bar, Barney was good for something. He didn't walk anyone. He just had 100 balls in play.
Yeah. And so if you had Barney, you needed Ray Dandridge, Art Fletcher, Rabbit Marinville, and not Buck Leonard.
Yeah. So I don't think we have a slide for this, but I guess what do we want to say about PTCS 20 or PTCS 2?
Where's the gif of the dumpster on fire rolling down the middle of the Japanese street? That's how it was for me. Yeah, I do think I did a fairly good job. I should say Exto did a fairly good job of helping me decide my pitchers. Um, but yeah, I fell in love shiny bobble syndrome. I fell way too in love with Denny Lyons. That was my regret. I do think Ray Dandridge was the call at third base, and so there were a couple of errors like that in PTCS in a single tournament, the 1% here, 2% there, in a 7-game series like I had that knocked me out, could have made a huge difference. I think my other regret is I do wish I had given Leon Day a shot in the weekly. I think he was very relevant in that format for a starting rotation. So that's me. What about you, Aster?
So I kind of want to take a 35,000 feet view of this and just like putting PTCS2 in the context of all four of the PTCSs that will make up the first PTMS, is that ultimately we're still playing a couple of 128 team tournaments, like no amount of time spent modeling, even the best model, the best experience, the best roster building. It's still a 128 team tournament. To make it to the top four is impressive. I mean, the people who made it in both the daily and the weekly for the tournaments are very good players, and so and only 4 of them can make it in each, and so you're gonna a lot of good players are not gonna do well at all. I mean, I was amazed at how many guys I consider among the very top players were out in the first round. Some of that was, just the randomness of, the seeding, especially in the daily, where you have some top players that kind of dabble in the daily because they focus on the weeklies, and so I think I was, my main team was like a 50 seed in the daily, and there were some really good teams that just faced off in the first round because they weren't top seeds just because of how little they played the format. And so I think the bottom line that I want to get across is, you need to think of each one of these tournaments as essentially a lottery ticket. And if you really put in the work where you either you model or you conceptualize it, you look at, whatever semi-relevant data is available, you really, put together a quality roster, maybe you pick up a couple players that you think are going to fit well into your build. All you're really doing maybe is getting one number where, if the lottery, you need all 7 numbers, you're figuring out one number beforehand. You still need random chance to go your way in that particular tournament, to actually, qualify. And so obviously, the more chances you have, the better. You can qualify, in multiple formats and, have alts get in as well. You're going to give yourself more chances at it. Also, then the work that you put in gets spread out over more teams that you're building a roster for, and just keep on plugging at it. Because sometimes, I felt like when I had 3 teams in round 4 and I liked my matchups, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely getting one of these teams through, and then all 3 lost in that round. That's just sometimes the coin flips your way, sometimes it doesn't, and you don't really have that much influence over the coin. You just have to accept the results, move on, and prepare for the next one. So, congratulations to the people who qualified for the PTCMS, and hopefully we'll get in there next time. And meanwhile, all 3 of us are still alive in the Larkin sweepstakes.
Hey!
So Durden broke his streak of getting knocked out in the 3rd round during the stream. I think it was 3 in a row.
I thought it was every week, but I'll take.
You thought it was every week? Okay.
Hurry up! In the stream.
So we need to quit the stream, because if he gets knocked out in the 4th round, then the streak would continue. So Exto, any last thoughts so that we prevent Durden from getting knocked out?
Yeah, it was a lot of work to put this all together. Not just like for the stream, but the preparation required.
Yeah.
And
You essentially invented a whole new way of modeling for yourself, which, Astor and I definitely benefit from. But, I mean, you just took a loose conversation we had just around theory of how to balance WOBA, subtracting differences from pitching and things like that. Like, you just took a loose conversation we had and created an entirely new infrastructure for predictive modeling, which just blows me away seeing it in action. So
yeah, and it not. It's been fun to try and see how it works out. So I like last week with the live update, and then with PTCS, it was a lot to try to update everything to make it useful, but it was I feel like going forward it'll make things fun. Like I think not to talk not about PTCS, but like I did the model for the Monday Silver based off of just last week's Silver, and it told me to play a guy named Sid Gordon. Do you know who Sid Gordon is?
I do know Sid Gordon.
So
That's a spicy selection.
yeah, and he's doing really well. So I think like that's something a little different than having just looked at kind of observed data, because a lot of the things that observed data tells you is just like who you're playing. And I think for the first part of the cycle, I spent a lot of time just looking at who's playing who and kind of like depending on people smarter than me to like figure out what cards are good and modeling like even if I like it crashes and burns like playing Barney Brown in PTCS at least I think the idea and Aster has mentioned it before is that you can't be married to the model but at the same time I do think it's kind of neat
Yeah.
that
Well,
you find like somewhat feasible cards to play.
yeah. I'll give you mad props because one card that I look at it every single week. I think his first name's Bill. Bill Hinchman, silver, first base right field. I think he's like a 78. Um, I look at him every week and I don't have the guts to play him, and because we haven't really tested him, right? Like we haven't really given him a trial. And it's a big weekly tournament, so Larkin sweepstakes. And so every week I look at him and I'm like, man, I should try and fit him in. There's more and more left-handed pitching. And the model said he's one of the like best 4 or 5 bats in the whole format. And I love those little moments like that where I'm like, oh man, okay, my instincts could be good, but I still chickened out, didn't run him this week. So yeah, that was cool. That was seeing that in your model this morning.
Yeah,
Are you
so
talking about Jim Hickman?
Oh God, yes. I'm so tired. I'm sorry, Jim Hickman.
I think he and Ed Delahanty were good friends.
defense doesn't matter in modern era. That's the new update. It's not defense doesn't matter. It's defense doesn't matter in modern era.
There we
settings.
go.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this PTCS breakdown, and we have to end the stream now, or else I'm going to get cursed in round 4. So, thank you everyone for joining. Kamish, thanks for the raid, and we'll see you guys next week. We're probably going to do. See, Lud, you have more courage than me, and you're getting rewarded for it. We're probably going to do a low-key stream next week. So, if any of you would be interested in like a deck doctor type format where you want us to break down a roster build you did for a tournament, then let us know. Preferably cap, doesn't have to be cap. But if you're still with us and you're interested in us doing a deck doctor for one of your builds, shoot me a DM. Me, Aster, or Exto, shoot us a DM, and we may get you on the show one week soon. So. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon, and we appreciate it. And we'll see you guys. Aster Exto, I'll give you a second. Say bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming, listen to us. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Have a good one.
See you.